Michael, great to have you on the show. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
I think you would agree. All Americans would agree. We certainly don't want to be put on the wrong side of saying crime is bad and we'd like to fight all crime in cities. But there has been a trend in major cities, and particularly in Washington, D.C., toward lower crime. If it wasn't an emergency in Donald Trump's first term, it's certainly less of an emergency now.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying there is crime in Washington, D.C., and there is a crime problem in Washington, D.C. And I see the president's response to that. I look at it in two parts. But first, I want to remind Americans, I know it's been talked about a lot this week, but it bears repeating, especially from myself, on January 6, 2021, when 15...
January 6th. On January 6th. You know, this whole thing reads like clockwork. You know, it's like when all fails, call him a convicted felon. When all fails, bring up January 6th. When all fails, talk about the Epstein files. Why don't you guys just bring the facts? Why don't you guys just bring the facts? And you will be respected more. That's all we ask. That's why conservative voices, independent media is blowing you guys out of the water. Because you guys have lost relevance, because you guys keep floating lies.
15,000 Trump supporters marched on the Capitol, stormed the Capitol, and assaulted law enforcement officers. Donald Trump didn't see fit to call in the National Guard then and sat idly by for hours.
Yeah, so Mr. Fannon, you are a disgrace to the uniform that you wore because you just lied. I will say that to your face because you have no character for saying something that has been long debunked. This is 2025. This is an incident that took place 4 years ago. And there has been video upon video upon video evidence to show that Donald Trump was in the clear. He offered National Guard protection to Nancy Pelosi. She rejected it. And then we have video of law enforcement in the Capitol building letting people in. We have video of FBI plants in the crowd, trying to rile up the crowd to do something stupid. And of course, they did something stupid. And then you want to go this way? After 4 years of all that evidence, the man lacks integrity or character because he just repeated a lie that has long been debunked.
Hours while officers like myself were being beaten and almost killed. That being said,
how about Ms. Babbitt, I think it was, who was shot for simply climbing through a window? Everyone talks about how the officers were attacked. There were 0 fatalities. Of course, we remember that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden kept lying about the officer that died of their wounds, but that was not the case after an investigation was carried out. That was not the case. That officer did not die of any wounds sustained during the demonstration or the protest. So you have people, like him who infested law enforcement, who infested the FBI, who lied repeatedly and tried to push a leftist narrative. And they keep trying to do it. And of course, MSNBC, I keep misnaming them, TDSBC continues to put these faces out there to tell a lie. It's so sad. I respect law enforcement. I do. But you can't respect anyone who blatantly tells a lie about something that has been debunked. And he's bringing it up now to validate his claim that there's something wrong with Donald Trump calling in the National Guard.
He now feels as though he should deploy the National Guard. And the issue that I take with that is there is no crime, there's no spike in crime that we're experiencing in Washington, D.C. And even then, what is it exactly that the National Guard will do to quell that other than, the optics of this occupying force, which I think most Americans resent. I certainly would resent that if I saw this show of force in my community.
Well, we have people who live in Washington, D.C. who have aired their pleasure at seeing the National Guard being released because the D.C. police is undermanned, if that's a word. They don't have enough police officers, and they've all been on mandatory overtime. So they are overworked. So this was a relief for a lot of them. And we've heard the reports that the crime statistics were fudged and that the higher-ups were instructing the police officers or the police departments to release fudged numbers. Why aren't we talking about this? Oh yeah, because this was all being said with no facts or evidence, but we do have the facts and evidence right now of the numbers actually being fudged. We have the reports from the police union about how this was going on for years. So I like to see this after the fact. Why is this important? It's because when you see this after the fact, it tells you how to react when current news, stuff that's going on in the current news cycle is happening, and all the talking heads are trying to get you to panic and lose your mind and say things that aren't true or to believe things that aren't true. It helps you stay centered. It helps you stay calm. It helps you know what to do when they begin to do all the nonsense that they set out to put out in the ether. All right, so let's keep going.
And I know a lot of DC residents that I've talked to over the past weeks certainly resent seeing this in their community, and it does nothing. Having armored vehicles parked on, the National Mall does nothing except create this illusion of, or the idea of fear and an occupying.
Yet we have we have the lowest crime rates in Washington, D.C. in years. We have all these arrests. We have these numbers coming out. So you might be watching and you don't agree, and you're like, hey, you pointed out that numbers were forged by the DC leadership. How come you're believing these numbers by the Trump administration? Well, that's a good question. Why should I believe those numbers? What I would say is this: we will take these numbers into consideration, and then in a few months or a few years, if it does come out that these numbers were fudged, I and other independent creators should come out to call it out. But since the numbers that were being released by the DC Police Department were shown to be false, none of these outlets have stepped forward to say, well, we were working with the wrong information. So there's something very off about simply doing that. But I do want to promise you that if something changes about those numbers, I definitely will be stepping forward to say, look, they lied, and this is actually what happened. And that's what I expect anyone with a good conscience to do.
Force. Then if you talk about the way that Donald Trump is now deploying these federal agencies, the three-letter agencies, ATF, yep. DEA, FBI, there is a place. I was a federal task force officer. I worked alongside of federal partners as a metropolitan police officer. There is a place for that. That place is not having roving bands of officers in tactical gear aimlessly walking around, Georgetown or downtown Washington, D.C., again, creating, the optics of an occupying force.
So here's what people like this don't get. They can't contradict themselves by showing themselves as former law enforcement officers, claiming that they have solidarity with the people that are being used wrongly by the Trump administration, and then saying things like this about the people in uniform who are simply establishing a presence to ensure that law and order is enforced. He's calling a police patrol aimless roaming about. In every city that has a police department, there is a show of force where you have beat cops walking around. It is to show that there is a presence of law and order. You have patrol vehicles driving around. In the little city where I live, I see patrol vehicles driving around regularly. I don't think they're roaming about. It's called a patrol vehicle for a reason. It's meant to move around. They aren't meant to have a kind of they aren't meant to have a staggered, a routine patrol route. It's meant to be unpredictable, because if the criminals can predict your movement, then they can avoid you and commit the crimes when you're not there. So that's why I said in the opening that this guy has lost my respect. He's saying things that are just not true. He's trying to paint a picture that if you have law enforcement walking around randomly, that's a bad thing. That if you have people who are partnered up to work in groups, that they are now roving bands. This is the narrative of leftists. I have zero respect for it. I'm so sorry, but if you think that I'm going too hard on him, leave a chat and let me know what you really think. But if you think that I'm making a point, please leave a chat. Let me know that you support this, because you have people like this that are going to continue to say stuff that makes no sense. And you know the sad thing, that there's a 10-year-old somewhere watching MSNBC and listening to this guy. And as far as he's concerned, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he is to be believed. And a 10-year-old is giving a worldview that is false and destructive.
And fear. The community policing model was born out of this.
Yes.
And it's an imperfect model.
But you're trained for it. You're trying to get, everybody's trying to get better at it, right? It's imperfect, but it's the idea that that's a different role than the National Guard has.
Well, it comes from, the idea that these agencies are charged with keeping the community safe. And citizens should have a say-so in how they are policed. And so citizens don't want to feel as though they're occupied. They want to be safe, but they don't want to feel like they're being, occupied by an army.
So I often point out that politicians who are vocal against law and order being enforced have their own private security. This guy is an ex-law enforcement officer. He definitely has, a firearm concealed carry. He knows how to use firearms. In essence, he's trained to protect himself. Okay? So as far as he's concerned, anyone who can't protect themselves isn't a factor. He can protect himself and his family. He can say whatever he wants. And as far as he's concerned, if the fallout is that you and your family get mugged or get burglarized or robbed in your own home or attacked on the street or carjacked, as long as it suits the narrative that Trump is evil and bad and is a dictator, he doesn't care. That's what I'm getting out of this whole interview. TDSBC is not disappointing at all. Not disappointing. They are just doing exactly what you'd expect them to do.
And that's what you have now taking over in DC. And it's not an efficient use of those resources. They could be better used. Federal agencies do a few things really, really well. They know how to conduct long-term investigations, and they bring with them federal resources, technology, money that local police departments don't have access to. Yeah. And so that's how these, agents should be used to bolster these, federal task force, not out there walking around harassing citizens and pissing people off.
Well, the citizens in this video don't look harassed, do they? Let me know in the chat or in the comment section. Do they look harassed? You've seen pictures of them taking selfies with the National Guard. I hope this is making sense. I hope it's making sense, because when you see people who oppose law and order, they go against law and order, it's very clear that they are for the criminals, that they are for crime. They don't care about the regular citizen who can't defend themselves. They are for crime, 100%. It's amazing that MSNBC, TDSBC, was putting up this footage of people comfortable with the National Guard around them. there's no chaos, there's no fear. Everyone is comfortable with them being there. And there's a voiceover of them being said to be harassing people. You can't make this up. Honestly, you can't make this up. You know, I used to be concerned that after Trump won, that there'll be no place for the content that I was creating because I was following the election and I was talking about, you know, the news and everything else. I felt that Trump's winning would have delegitimized all of these leftist platforms, and there would be nothing to talk about because they would be so ashamed that they would simply slink back into their holes and squeak out little bits and pieces of news and let the world heal. But I was wrong. They have quadrupled down and they are still producing the same insanity that they did all through the Biden years and during the campaign season. And you know what? I'm glad they've given my YouTube channel work to do. So thank you, TDSBC. You've made my channel work.
who have to, you know, are trying to go about their daily business and see this in their streets.
The other question I've got is ICE. It feels like this all feels like the National Guard and ICE. It all feels like Donald Trump trying to sort of normalize the idea that his police are in charge, not.
All right. So we're going to stop here because this is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Like, I mean, right now I am feeling secondhand embarrassment for these guys. All right. For Mr. Fannon, for Mr. Velshi. It's just secondhand embarrassment at this point, you know, and there's only so much a man can take. So we're going to stop here. Let me know what you think of this story. Do you think that there's merit to the narrative that TDSBC is pushing about the fact that Donald Trump is using his own, he's abusing his power, he is violating the Constitution? The National Guard has just been described by a former law enforcement agent as roving bands as roving bands, okay, and as harassing citizens of DC. This was a few days ago, and now we have videos of citizens of DC rejoicing at the arrival of the National Guard because everyone knew that the police force was undermanned. They did not have enough officers. Violent crime was spiking. Joe Scarborough, in a previous video that I did, talked about how people were routinely being mugged. This was 10 years ago. Routinely being mugged in Washington, D.C. when he lived there. You have the leftist that sent in the text saying that, yes, there's a crime problem in D.C. It's unfortunate that we do have people who are so sold out to evil that they will blatantly tell a lie that puts other people at risk. Well, so let me know what you think in the comment section of this story. If you're live, thank you for watching with me. If you want to leave a thought in the chat, I would love to engage with you and maybe get your thoughts on the story. What do you think? I see that the poll has returned a final result of 92% say yes. They say yes, that if local police lacks the ability to keep the citizens safe, that the federal government should step in. A small percentage, a fringe percentage, say no. And that's what we see in the world. We see people who have fringe ideas, who largely will not be affected when those fringe ideas take hold. In fact, many of them position themselves to benefit from the enforcement of these fringe ideas, like law enforcement, a breakdown of law enforcement. Many of them have private security, and maybe they run private security companies, or they invest in private security companies, and they know that a crime spike is good business for them. And so they will say things to encourage the mayhem because it's good for their bottom line. These are the kinds of conversations that you see online, and you have to follow the money. When someone is pushing a narrative that doesn't make sense, follow the money. All right, so we're going to be looking at the comments from this story. I almost forgot that we hadn't looked at the comment section. This is TDSBC. So take a deep breath. Take a deep breath of cold, fresh air because we're diving into the dregs. Let's go. First comment, quote Gandhi, non-cooperation with evil is a duty. Of course, he doesn't live in, or she doesn't live in Washington, D.C. Michael Fannon, thanks for your courage, standing up when most are sitting down. You think it's courage to tell you all to get used to crime? Well done. This isn't public safety. We are less safe all the way around. Look, there's a special breed of viewers who watch TDSBC and have it on repeat on their screens all over their homes. There's a special, okay? They have long taken leave of common sense. So don't be shocked. I know some of you are clutching at your pearls. Look, whenever we go into TDSBC and read the comment section, don't be shocked. You're going to meet a lot of weirdos, okay, who believe the weirdest things. All right, let's go. The blood is on this president's hands. Okay, sorry, the blood on this president's hands cannot be washed. Thank you, sir, for your service. You can't make this up. Okay, so how does Trump have blood on his hands? Explain. The guy who's doing his best to stop wars, to keep his citizens safe. Where is the blood on his hands? Where? 441 likes. There it is. TDSBC fans, special brief. Thank you for not staying silent. The overall crime in Washington is low, but the crime at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is skyrocketing. Someone should really look into that. Look, I say, this is okay. There comes a point where there has to be heroic music playing in the background here. There comes a point when a man must refuse to answer to his leader if he is also to answer to his own conscience. Hartley Shock, 1902-2000. Prosecutor at the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal. Yeah, fitting, because you call Trump a nah anymore. I mean, impeach convict and remove. It sounds like Voldemort or the head of the Daleks. ICE equals guest. And you wonder why violent crime against ICE has gone up over 700%. Michael Fannon, I have so much gratitude for you and your voice of law enforcement. Many blessings. Well, okay. Let's leave the Zoom that is TDSBC.